The wind never stopped. The plains were empty, no trees, no wood to burn, only hide snow and what the herd left behind. So they burned dung, not logs. Heated stones, not stoves. Built warmth from the ground up layer by layer, breath by breath. The fire was small, but the system was perfect. Every ember, every hide, every grain of ash worked together. They didn't outfire the winter, they outsmarted it. How Native Americans survived the cold without firewood. They burned what the land offered, and it was enough. The Great Plains had no trees, no forests to cut, just wind, grass, and horizon without end. So they learned to build fire from what remained. Buffalo dung became their forest. Dry, light, and packed with the memory of grass, it burned slow and steady. Less smoke, less waste. A single handful could last through the night. The smell was faint, warm, earthy, clean. It was heat drawn not from wood, but from the life of the plains itself. Each autumn before the snow began, families gathered their fuel. They walked the grasslands after the herds had passed, picking what the earth had left behind. Buffalo chips dried on sun-warmed stone, hardened in the open wind. Each family stacked them high beside the teepee layer after layer, ready before the first frost. They mixed dung with dried grass to catch the spark. A smear of bone grease or melted fat turned embers into lasting glow. It wasn't just fuel, it was planning. It was memory, a promise that warmth would return when winter came. Inside the teepee, the fire lived small. A shallow pit no deeper than 6 inches held the flame. Low fire, long heat. The cone walls caught the warmth rising slow through the vent above. Air moved like breath, steady, silent, alive. No trees cut, no smoke trapped. A perfect balance of air, earth, and patience. Even the ashes were not waste. They used them again, spread over ice for grip, mixed with hides to dry meat faster. The remains of one night's fire became the foundation for the next day's survival. They burned what others would ignore and turned scarcity into system. Their fires were not large, but they lasted. Their heat was not fierce, but it endured, because survival was never about abundance. It was about precision. They didn't survive by burning more. They survived by wasting less. And on the Great Plains, where the sky met the cold earth, warmth was never about firewood. It was about understanding heat itself. Buffalo dung was the forest of the plains. Each piece held the memory of grass pressed tight by the weight of the herd, dried by the sun, carried by the wind. What looked like waste was in truth stored heat gathered from summer, waiting for winter. When burned, it gave off a slow, steady flame that kept its shape. Smoke stayed low. Air stayed clean enough to breathe. A log burns bright, then dies fast. Dung burns slow and lasts. Its strength was patience, and patience on the plains meant survival. Inside the teepee, that difference could mean life or death. No thick smoke to choke the air, no sparks to burn the hides, just a quiet, even warmth that stayed through the night. It worked because of structure. Dung is grass pressed tight, a natural insulation that slows the escape of air and fire. The flame eats it layer by layer, never rushing, never wasting. Each ember holds the next one alive. Where a log explodes into ash, dung endures in silence. And silence was precious when the wind outside screamed for days. They understood the physics without naming it. Heat moves where air moves. Keep air still and warmth stays longer. The teepee itself became part of the system. Low fire pit vent, above steady flow. Smoke escaped slowly. Air came in cold and left warm. It was primitive HVAC, designed by instinct, proven by time. To them, fire was not a wild thing. It was a tool of control, balance between fuel and breath. They didn't burn for light. They burned for endurance. For air that stayed clear, for warmth that didn't vanish when the wood ran out. The secret was simple. They built a system, not a flame. And that system worked because every part from dung to air followed one quiet rule. Hold heat, don't chase it. When the fires went out, the stones remembered. They held the heat longer than flame, silent, steady, safe. In a land where wood was rare and wind constant, the tribes turned to earth itself for warmth. They learned that stone could store what fire gave. Not light, not smoke, but endurance. Each night, they heated stones in the center pit, the same shallow circle where Dung had burned before. When the embers died, the stones glowed red, whispering heat through the teepee. 4 to 6 hours of warmth without smoke, without sound. The air stayed clear. The hides stayed dry. Children could sleep without choking on ash. And when morning came, the stones still breathed a faint, living heat. They treated them like batteries charged by fire released by time. It was a simple science born from observation. Stone absorbs. Stone releases. The tighter the teepee, the longer the warmth remained. Thick hides and woven grass trapped the heat inside. Every layer worked like insulation. The floor beneath became warm, the air above calm. The secret was rhythm. Fire built the charge. Stone held it. Earth returned it. It was a cycle not of consumption, but of cooperation. They didn't burn harder. They burned smarter. Even in silence, the system worked. Outside, the wind roared like an animal. Inside, the air shimmered gently warm enough to hold life, quiet enough to rest. It wasn't the flame that saved them. It was the patience between fires. They understood something we often forget. Heat is not made. It is kept. And the stones lying under buffalo hides and dry grass became more than tools. They were memory of fire, of warmth, of the will to endure. They learned that warmth doesn't rise, it returns. The ground beneath them was never dead. It breathed slow like an animal sleeping through the storm. When fire faded and the air turned thin, the earth still held the last breath of the day. Inside each teepee, the floor became part of the system. Layers of willow mats first woven tight to lift the sleepers from frost. Then dried grass, soft and hollow, to trap still air. Above that thick buffalo, hides heavy with memory and oil. Together, they made insulation a quiet wall between the skin and the frozen ground. Under the center pit, heat gathered and circled. The shallow fire drew air upward, while the packed soil below stayed warm for hours. That low convection turned the teepee into a living lung. Warm air rose, cool air settled, and the rhythm kept repeating. No one named it. They simply built it right. It was science by instinct. Air moves, so they slowed it. Heat escapes, so they caught it. Each layer of earth, mat, and hide became a chamber that stored the night's energy. When morning came, they could still feel the warmth through the soles of their feet, the ground breathing back what the fire had once given. They didn't fight the cold from above. They worked with the heat below. Every tepee was a machine made of patience, firestone, earth, and air, all in quiet balance. No metal, no insulation sheets, just rhythm and understanding. The lesson was simple. You don't conquer winter, you design with it. And the ground, silent and patient, became their greatest ally, the first and oldest heater ever made. They didn't chase heat, they learned to hold it. The secret was never in the flame, it was in the air that carried it. Inside the teepee, they managed air, not fire. When cold winds screamed outside, the smoke flaps closed. The intake slowed, pressure balanced, and warmth stayed where it belonged. The Great Plains offered no luxury of waste. Every breath counted, every ember had a purpose. When the air stood still, the heat lingered longer. It didn't escape into the sky. It stayed low, wrapping the people and the earth beneath them. They built efficiency from stillness. The teepee became a breathing engine not of machinery, but of rhythm. Cool air crept in from below, drawn by the low pressure near the fire pit. It warmed, rose, and escaped gently through the top vent. That constant cycle created comfort, not chaos. A primitive HVAC system designed centuries before the term existed. Simple, silent, self-sustaining. The secret wasn't strength. It was sensitivity. Every fuel, every stone, every layer had a job. The hides held the warmth. The mats trapped the air. The stones released heat slow and steady. And the fire, small, calm, contained, was only the heartbeat. The rest of the body was air and patience. They didn't fight the wind, they used it. When storms pressed against the teepee walls, the shifting pressure inside pushed the warm air downward. What should have been loss became balance. The colder the world outside, the harder the system worked to stay alive. It was a perfect logic, one born not of invention, but of observation. They watched, they listened, and through that attention they discovered a rule most of us have forgotten. Warmth doesn't need more fire, it needs a place to stay. They didn't survive by fighting the cold, they adjusted to it. To them, warmth was never comfort, it was discipline. Each movement, each silence, each ember had a purpose. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. They learned that patience burns longer than fire. Because when storms erase the horizon, panic wastes more heat than wind ever could. So they moved slower, breathed slower, let the cold pass through instead of fighting against it. Endurance, not defiance, became their warmth. Every ember had its rhythm. Every breath carried the lesson. You don't build heat, you hold it. The people of the plains lived by that rule. When others built bigger fires, they built better systems. When others feared the storm, they listened. That listening became survival. Their world was not built on strength, but attention. They read the air before it froze. They saw the snow not as enemy, but as teacher. Even the silence had a function, a way to measure what remained alive. In the space between fire and frost, they found balance. There was a quiet pride in that patience. No boasting, no victory against nature. Only cooperation, a logic passed through generations, tested by blizzards, remembered in scars. It taught them that true warmth is not something you create, but something you earn by understanding. The modern mind looks for control. They looked for rhythm. And in that rhythm, they found life steady, deliberate, enduring. Because warmth to them was not a gift. It was proof of awareness. When the power fails, the same truth returns fuel air time. It doesn't matter if you live in a teepee or a city tower. The equation never changed. You lose heat when you lose balance. And balance has always been the oldest survival skill. They mastered it with buffalo dung and patience. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. They burned slow-sealed air and let warmth last through the night. We chase comfort with switches and wires. They built it with rhythm and understanding. And when storms came, their homes still breathed. Today, when the lights go dark, that same logic still saves lives. Fuel whatever you have. Air managed, not wasted. Time stretched by patience, not panic. Those three things in the right rhythm are enough. They always were. Modern houses forget what teepees knew. That heat is not power, it's design. That survival is not strength, it's attention. And that warmth is not something you find, it's something you build. The ancestors of the plains built systems, not fires. They engineered balance from simplicity, stone, hide, air, and time. When we return to that mindset, we stop fearing the cold. We start respecting it. Because survival isn't a contest. It's a conversation between human and nature, a quiet agreement to adapt. The storms haven't changed, only the tools have. But the rule remains the same. Hold heat, don't chase it. On-screen text fades in how Native Americans survived the cold without firewood. Ancient skills, proven through storms.